Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me, as always. Poppin' Rick.
What's up?
We got a good show for you today. As we enter into full-fledged Week 9 preparations, and we do trade targets. Last week we had a good number of views on our trade target show. So if you're watching this and you have questions, please leave them in the comments. But yeah, so we got trade targets today. Should be interesting. How you doing, Rick? You doing all right?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing totally mid.
You doing mid?
Yeah, it's because every single week that flies by, I know it's one less. Somebody said it was 100 days to the Super Bowl, and I cringed.
Ugh.
I was like, can we not say things like that? God, that devastates me slightly.
That is kind of crazy.
It's a long time, but it's also very short because
that's why you gotta just enjoy it, man. Enjoy the process.
I try. See, I'm trying to, but you're already talking about next year in the draft for the Patriots. But it's either way.
I'm a psycho, so.
But anyway, so yeah, we're gonna do Week 9 buys and sells today. Before we jump into that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platforms, please leave a review, share this pod with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below any questions you have for us on your trades.
Yeah, who should I trade? Should I trade Christian McCaffrey for Roshan Johnson?
For Roshan Johnson. I'd do it. Roshan's got a future. Justin's coming back.
I think he's got a breakout coming.
Yeah. But anyway, let's get to the buys and sells. And we'll start with the 3 buys that we have for you this week. So guys that you should be targeting in trades. And the first one is Mr. Tony Pollard. I hate to put guys on my own team on this list, and I'm halfway to like just being like, get off my team right now. Do not ever come close to my team ever again, Tony. You're hurting my soul.
You don't like the trade we made?
No. I mean, it's better than what I had, but Pollard just continues to get me nothing. So anyway, since his 22, 19, and 15 start to the season, he's had 9, 8, 17, and 6. So that sucks.
Yeah, that's not
the
good.
only good thing about having Tony Pollard at this point is, he had a bye week already. So don't have to worry.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't have to worry about that. But
you have him on this list, so
he's had a stretch of tough games, and to me, some of these, like against the Patriots and the Rams, they got blown out and they just started running the backups. At San Francisco, they were in a negative game script, and then he had a good game against the Chargers. So to me, it's like I look at these weeks, and obviously it's not a good stretch of games, but that makes him buyable. Like right now, rest of season, he should be in most people's top 10 in terms of rankings. Would you agree with that?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. And so, with that being said, a lot of these, fantasy experts are telling you, including us, like start him on a week-to-week basis. Like there's, you should be. And then he's not scoring, so that's what's hurting me. That's what makes Tony Pollard purchasable. That's what makes him viable. You can go out and you can trade for Tony Pollard because his name value isn't the same as somebody like, like a Derrick Henry, for example. He doesn't have that same weight. And he's had a couple of bad games in a row, and the manager is probably looking at him going, I don't want this guy anymore, like I feel 90% of the time. So for me, if I have him, you should probably like wisely be patient with Tony Pollard, which sucks. But if he's not on your team, this is a perfect guy to trade for. Like if you need running backs and you don't have any, like this is a dude that you run out and you go trade for, because more often than not with the easier games that he has on the schedule, which he has a lot of like orange and green games on Sleeper, for the most part, Pollard is going to put together really good performances as the season goes along. So he's going to get back to those really good games, and this stretch of bad games are probably going to disappear. But Tony Pollard is a dude that will get back to that, and if you don't trade for him now, you're probably not going to get that value back. The other thing I would say is that there are other guys that you could probably trade for. Let's see, I'm trying to think of another running back that hasn't been doing great, that's on a bad football team. I had an example before the show, but I forgot.
Is Derrick Henry been doing good?
Yeah, that would be one. So Derrick Henry is a guy that performs really well, but is on a bad football team, generally speaking. Hopefully, Thursday Night Football didn't show off.
We are recording this on Thursday, so
yes. But anyway, but for me, Tony Pollard is the starting running back who gets all of the workload on a football team, most of the workload on a football team that it has a good offense. So it's like he's going to have opportunities to score touchdowns. He's going to have opportunities to get fantasy points. He's going to have opportunities in the passing game and losses, and he's going to have opportunity to run the ball on the ground in games that they have the lead in. So it's like for him, he has a lot of opportunity in every aspect of the game, no matter what the game script is, and he can continue to have success in that aspect, and he's on a good offense. So to me, it's like I'd rather have him than have guys like, Josh Jacobs, for example, who is on a bad offense, maybe can continue to get a massive workload, but that offense ain't getting any better. So it's like, would you rather trade for Jacobs right now, or would you rather trade for Pollard? I think Pollard will jump out and become better. Monologue over about Tony Pollard.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I think the game scripts for him have been very tough, as you kind of brought up. The Rams, they blew him out, and he didn't really have a super high snap percentage. Same with the Patriots game. He only played 53% of the snaps. The 49ers was the opposite effect. They got blown out, so they weren't really using him on the ground at all. He only had 8 carries. And the one game that was competitive and close and was like kind of a normal game was the Chargers game. He had 17 fantasy points. So I think Pollard's still fine. I think he's good. Is he maybe that top 5 or 6 back you were hoping for? Probably not. But he's still a low end, I think, RB1.
Yeah. And
as you can tell by Morgan's reaction at the beginning of the show, you could probably get him because whoever has Pollard is probably a little frustrated right now.
Yeah.
And you might even be able to wait a week because he is playing Philly this week, and that's a really tough matchup as well. So we'll see how that goes. But I do think he'll have a decent week against Philly. But then after that, the Giants and Panthers next 2 weeks are dark green on sleepers. I mean, we talked about the Panthers being 32nd. I think the Giants are bottom 5.
Mm-hmm.
Then he has Washington after that, which is considered a mid matchup, but with their trades, I would say that's a really good matchup as well now. So he has 3 matchups in a row that should be really good after this week against Philly.
Does he play Washington again?
He does, but it's in week 18.
Oh, dang it.
Unfortunately.
As a Tony Pollard owner, I kind of need that.
So I do think his schedule going forward isn't too bad. He does have Philly one more time.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that,
quickly,
all pretty decent matchups.
Quickly, though, what do you think you could reasonably trade to get Tony Pollard?
I think you could probably move off of a wide receiver 2 to get him. If you were trying to, if you were weak at running back and you had a lot of receivers, a decent wide receiver 2. It can't be like any Joe Schmo.
Yeah.
But maybe someone in that like wide receiver, what's a middle of wide receiver 2? So that's like wide receiver 17, 18, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I mean, I agree. All right, let's talk about the second guy. Unless you have any more thoughts on Tony Pollard.
No.
Okay, it's Javonte Williams from Denver. Beginning of the season was tough. 9, 7, 8, 3, 7. I don't know if you watched Sunday.
Not really.
Vintage.
Not that game.
Vintage Javonte.
Whoa.
Has returned. Last 3 games, he's averaging about 4.8 yards per carry. He's had 15 and 27 carries in the last 2 games.
You're ramping up his work.
Both with 80 yards. And he's had 7 targets for 5 catches in 20 yards. So that's, 30 yards, sorry. And so that's not, those receiving numbers aren't great. But he's had 12 and 18 in 2 weeks. And against Kansas City, 18 fantasy points is pretty good. Kansas City's one of the better run-stopping teams in the league. He is on a bye this week. So that's something that if you have somebody who's already had a bye or you have a guy playing this week and you go to the team that has Javonte Williams and say, hey, I'll take that bye week off your hands. That could be good if you're a team that's winning a lot of games and you have an opportunity to make a trade like that. I'd get Javonte now. He's going to be cheap. And he has an easy rest of season schedule. Buffalo, Minnesota, Houston, Chargers, Patriots, Chargers again. The stretch of games...
Chargers twice as nice.
It's very nice. And the stretch of games in the postseason is really good as well. So I think Javonte has an opportunity to really start to turn it on in the second half. So I would buy him now. He's going to be cheap. I know he's had a couple of good games, but he's going to be very, very cheap. And I think you can anticipate some success. If you need a second or, a first or second flex on your team that is a little bit cheaper, I'd go out and get Javonte Williams.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because I think we had Breece Hall on this show like a few weeks ago. I want to say like maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And the way that these guys started really slow coming off the 20 ACL, but have really developed. I think they're both back, or at least very close to being back to what they were. And the guy who has Javonte, maybe he sees that he's improving, but I don't think maybe recognizes that he could, if he continues the path that he's on, end up being back to the old Javonte, which for me, I loved. And I think the old Javonte Williams, it could be a low end RB1, but we'll see how it goes. He has that kind of upside rest of season though with that schedule. Now being more close to fully healthy, snap percentage going up, all those things. So he's a really good buy. If the guy is kind of in love with Javonte though, and he's like, this is why I drafted him, then it's going to be tough to buy him. For most teams that have him, he's just a depth piece, probably a bench player. You may have to pay a little bit more than that, but probably a decent bench player, a decent swap on your bench will get it done. And that could be a huge payout for you, especially if you need a running back.
Okay. All right, let's move to the next guy, Deontay Johnson. If you drafted Deontay and then he got hurt and you waited all this time to start Deontay, all the power to you. He's probably a little bit cheaper than normal, but last week he had 14 targets, 8 catches for 85 yards. Not great in terms of efficiency, but 14 targets is wonderful.
So good PPR.
Oh my God, yeah. In PPR, that's a dream. He had 16 fantasy points, didn't score a touchdown. This is Deontay Johnson. This is what he does. The week before, he had 6 targets, 5 catches, 79 yards, so he was able to put together a 12-point fantasy day. He has Tennessee this week, so that's an easier matchup. And his rest of season schedule, while Green Bay, Cleveland, and Cincinnati are going to be tougher matchups, he ends with Arizona, New England, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, and Seattle, which Indianapolis and Seattle in the playoffs. Thank you very much. I'll take that all day.
Yeah.
So Deontay Johnson, great stash if you want to grab him, especially for the playoffs. You're a winning team and you want to add a guy that has a good playoff schedule. I'd love to add Deontay Johnson. If you're just looking to build and you need a dude who maybe isn't as expensive to get on your team, Deontay Johnson, and you need a receiver, Deontay Johnson's one of those guys. I don't love buying into the Steelers offense because I think it's terrible. But yeah. I think... and by the way, we haven't seen Thursday Night Football, so I don't know what Deontay Johnson did or if he's still around in the NFL because he may have gotten hurt. So if he got hurt, ignore all this advice for Deontay Johnson. But he is going to be on the cheaper side, and you're going to be able to get him for not a wide receiver 1. And if he starts producing wide receiver 1 numbers or at least mid-range wide receiver 2 numbers, I think you could easily swing a running back who's underperforming for Deontay Johnson. So I like that. Go out and get Deontay. Good deal.
Yeah, agreed. Deontay is a great buy. And I talked about this a little bit before that he was coming back and he's going to demand a high target share when he comes back, and he's done that so far. He's just a really, really solid player for you. Will get a lot of targets, and because of that, will get PPR points, and he's a good wide receiver 2 or 3. That you can get at a decent price. And that playoff schedule is definitely juicy. I would love to buy into that. Only concern with Deontay Johnson, he was fully healthy last year, right?
Yeah.
He hasn't scored a touchdown since 2021. He played a full season last year, a 16-game NFL season. He played 17-game NFL season, and he didn't score a touchdown. And in 4 games so far this year, he has not scored a touchdown. that Steelers offense is really brutal, especially in the past game. So that does concern me with this kind of ceiling, but he's still very solid, still gets a lot of targets, and because of that, still gets a decent amount of fantasy points.
Yeah, love Deontay Johnson. All right, Rick, let's move to the sells. So I do want to preface this by saying some of our sells here are guys that we have already talked about in the past. And the reason why I put them on this list and do this show now is because we are getting to trade deadline time for a lot of fantasy leagues. Usually, like, our league waits till like week 12 because the playoffs start, I think, week 14. Yeah, 14, 15, 16, or maybe 15, 16, 17. But we usually wait till like week 12 or 13 right before the playoffs. So we wait a little bit longer, but a lot of leagues' trade deadlines are usually like week 10 or 11. And so we're getting into that time. I want to mention the guys that we've mentioned in the past who still continue to be sells that you should probably dump now before things go sour, or that you should trade just to get value out of. So that's what some of these guys are. There's some repeats. There's a guy that's not. But anyway, Rick, give us our first sell.
Our first sell, I think, is a repeat, and that's Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, Mostert.
But he's a repeat because you can also still sell him. A-Chain is coming back very soon. I think this week he's still on IR, and I think they have a bye after. I could be wrong. He's still on IR. Then it's the bye. There's already reports, though, saying that he's expected to be fully healthy and return by week 11 after the bye. So this is the time to trade him. I mean, Mostert is still the guy in the backfield, but you know what? He's not producing at the level that he was in the beginning of the season, even though he's gotten a lot of opportunities. So that is only bad things for Mostert, because that means when A-Chain comes back, he might start as the lead back. Against the Eagles, he had 6 points, which was a very tough matchup. But the Patriots matchup wasn't really a super tough matchup. He only had 10 fantasy points, so nothing super crazy. And against the Chiefs, I don't really expect a 30-plus point week either. And then you get A-Chain coming back. So you can still sell him at a pretty high price. He's RB3 still on the season. So sell him now while you can, because he's not going to finish in the top 3.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the main thing for Raheem Mostert is just is that top 3 running back numbers that he has. And I know we're all going to look at this and pace out the first 9-10 weeks of the season and see that he was a top 3 running back. But it wouldn't surprise me if the back half of the season, once Devon A-Chain comes back, that you're going to see Mostert have some big games, but then you're going to see him have like 3-4 point games, and it's going to be all A-Chain at the end of the day. So I just sell Mostert on that because I love having assets on the Miami Dolphins. Like they're always going to be good to have. But I think Mostert, to me, you can sell him as a top 3 running back in fantasy football to maybe a team who doesn't necessarily understand fantasy football that best. But even that, like, if somebody knows the game, they might want Raheem Mostert's production. So I like trading him based on just the value that he has right now, and try to dump him for something before A-Chain gets back and before he starts to take a little bit of dip in fantasy production. I think it's smart. Who's the second guy, right?
Yep. The second guy on our list is Derrick Henry. Now, I probably should have said something before the show because we have 2 guys playing on Thursday night on this list, but we recorded this on Thursday night, so we don't know how he did on Thursday.
Yeah.
But things might be different. Maybe he gets injured. Maybe he gets 50 points. Who knows? But Derrick Henry has kind of been up and down this year, right? He's been sort of not the same Derrick Henry that we've seen in the past. The Titans overall, their offense hasn't been good. It's actually been really brutal before Levis came in last week. And then who knows on Levis again? We don't know with Thursday night, but we're not expecting Levis to come in and shake the world up. And Tajay Spears gets enough work where it's not the Derrick Henry we remember, but the name value is there.
Boom.
Derrick Henry's still good.
That's it.
He's still decent. He's still solid. And you could probably win a fantasy championship with him on your team, without question, right? But he's Derrick Henry. The name value, I think, is higher than his actual value. You can sell him for sure for an elite level player at running back or wide receiver where at this point in his career, I don't know if he's that. He's RB12 right now in the season. That kind of feels about right, to me. And I think you could absolutely get a top 10 guy at either running back or maybe a top 12 guy at wide receiver. You could probably trade Derrick Henry for a low-end wide receiver 1, which in PPR leagues is much more valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, like, if you wanted to keep Derrick Henry, that's fine.
Yeah, we have guys on the show all the time that we say this, but it is true.
Like, he's not bad. I just think he's old. He's 29. So, like, and I feel like he's never been injured. So, like, there's that.
He hasn't been. He was injured not last year, but the year before that, I think.
Yeah, so, like, he hasn't really had, like, a massive injury or had to miss long periods of time. So, like, it almost feels. I'm not want to say he's due, but, like, you know, and I don't root for injury on anyone. Like, I would rather Derrick Henry stay.
Even without injury, though, he has not been the same player this year.
I wish it was like Madden and I could just turn injuries off. That would be great. But yeah, it's like, you know, he hasn't been the same Derrick Henry. He's clearly not that top 3 guy that we've had. And I think to be honest with you, Rick, I think that's more or less tied to the fact that he still has some 20-point games there. He still has some 20-point games here and there. I mean, 20 carry games, not 20-point games. 20 carry games here and there, but they've been limiting his workload, like Rick said, and giving Tajay Spears more opportunity. I think that's on purpose because they know he's getting older and they don't want to. But I think that's why he hasn't been producing as much in fantasy football. So I think as the weeks go along, he does have a easier second half of the season schedule. So it's not like the end of the world if you do keep him, or you even want to trade for him. But I say sell him specifically, like Rick said, specifically because I think the name value is there, and he's not producing like the top 3, top 4, top 5 running back that he was, but you can still kind of sell him as that because, you know, you might say, oh, he's only top 12 right now, but look at the schedule, you know, look at what Derrick Henry has done in the past, in years past. He still can be that top 5 guy, and you can sell them on that and get something of equivalent value in the top 5 return. I don't think you could trade Derrick Henry and get like Stefon Diggs. But I do think you could get, right now, CeeDee Lamb's ranked like 11 or 12. You might be able to get the CeeDee Lamb.
After this last week from him, though, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I bet you could trade. Right. Would you have had Devontae Adams for this season or Derrick Henry?
Oh, I don't know about Adams.
I know you don't like old players, but.
No. Well, it's tough because it's old players, but Adams is interesting because they don't really have a quarterback, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I almost would rather have Derrick Henry than him, but there are guys that are underperforming. Like Cooper Kupp's underperforming right now. He's hit 2 6-point weeks in a row in PPR. Keenan Allen didn't have the greatest week last week, so it's like guys like that I would use Derrick Henry to go get because I think you have an opportunity possibly to get those. Now, if that's a little bit tougher, I'm okay with a low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 in return for Derrick Henry. And I think that would be okay. But yeah, I mean, if you could get a Brandon Ayuk for Derrick Henry, I do that all day.
I will say, I'd rather have Derrick Henry than Raheem Mostert rest of the season.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, agreed. 1,000%. So Mostert's like a ticking time bomb in terms of production. Henry's not. Like he'll still, if he's healthy and he's on the field,
he'll still have good weeks.
He's gonna get 16 to 18 carries, and he's gonna have good weeks, and he's like 13, 18, 2, 25, 9, 19, 16. So he's just consistently at 15 points, which is really good.
But what he hasn't done in the past that he is doing this year, I feel like.
Yeah.
Last year he did a little bit, but not to the same level because he's already had 2 kind of bad games. I feel like you're gonna get those 6, 7, 8. Like single-digit point weeks in there that hurt his elite value. And I don't really see him getting like 40 anymore. Like back in the past where he would get those he'd play like the Jaguars or the Houston Texans and he'd get like 35, 40 fantasy points. Like I don't think he's getting that anymore at this point in his career.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Bro, you put another Titan on this list.
Oh, God, I didn't even realize. I just
3 players for Thursday Night Football on this list. And 2 Titans.
All right.
Now this one...
Yeah,
this last guy, I kind of...
Yeah, go ahead. Give your thoughts.
Well, it's just very dependent on Will Levis. And we're gonna find out. I'm not saying we're gonna fully find out Thursday night because it's a Thursday night game, tough matchup, second ever start, whatever. So it might not look great. But the thing with Hopkins is he's coming off a monster week, so I get the idea of selling him, and I'm not opposed to it. The week that he had, and you can sell the Will Levis thing too if Will Levis plays well, and all those things, which is true, and it makes Hopkins more sellable, and you could probably get a good player. He also, like Derrick Henry, has the name value. My only gripe with this is if Will Levis is just decent, that is an upgrade for DeAndre Hopkins going forward.
Yeah.
Because he's had Tannehill the first 6 weeks of the season, and it hasn't looked good with Tannehill. But Tannehill has been probably the worst quarterback. Like Zach Wilson has had better stats to start the year than Ryan Tannehill, which is saying a lot.
Yeah.
So Tannehill has been probably the worst quarterback in the league statistically, or at least bottom 3 to start the season. So if Levis comes in rest of season and he's the starter going forward the rest of the season and is like 24th among quarterbacks, like he's still not good, but he's better than what Tannehill was. That's still an upgrade for Hopkins, and he ends up being decent rest of the season. So I would be a little cautious about that. But then maybe Will Levis sucks and he absolutely blows, and you can capitalize on this opportunity to sell Hopkins.
Yeah. I agree with everything Rick said.
Okay.
I think DeAndre Hopkins is fine, but like the 3 touchdowns
is
huge.
3 touchdowns.
Like that's like I would like to say that he's going to produce, but I just can't. Like he hasn't really been great all year, and even if Levis is good, Levis is going to be a guy that like blows with the breeze. You know what I mean? Like he's a rookie, so there's going to be weeks where he gets 25, and there's going to be weeks where he gets 7, and it's going to be inconsistent and gross. And you know who else is going to blow with that same breeze? Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins. So you can sell him on that 3 touchdowns. I mean, I think that's the main like reason to sell him is, he scored the 3. Not don't say directly, he scored 3 touchdowns in this game, he's going to be good. But like having that big game, it makes people who like D-Hop in the past think, okay, D-Hop's back. And he hasn't been bad this year. But he like just football wise, he's been, he's looked healthy. He's been fine. He hasn't been the history of Randy Moss going to the Titans and Julio Jones going to the Titans. Like he hasn't,
that is true.
He hasn't followed.
He's been better than those guys.
But he's certainly not the D-Hop that we saw in Houston, and not even the D-Hop that we had last year in Arizona. So like if that name value still is there and he doesn't have that stench, you might be able to sell him. But every time an old man gets a 3 touchdown game, you gotta take advantage. DeAndre Hopkins might score 5 touchdowns on the season, and 3 of them were in one game.
That is very true.
Has he scored a touchdown this year, by the way? Yeah,
not before this week.
Gee whiz. Anyway, any more thoughts on Hopkins?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, there you go. There are your buys and sells. Sorry for it being so Thursday Night Football heavy. I don't know. Maybe I was thinking about Thursday Night Football when I put the list together. I have no idea. But anyway, Tony Pollard, Javonte Williams, Deontay Johnson buys, Raheem Mostert, Derrick Henry, DeAndre Hopkins sells. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Enjoy football. See you later.
Take it easy.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.